This is Aberration Earth. Our adventure continues. Many minutes later, and with many corridors behind them, the escort began splitting off as the various men went their separate ways, each to their own corridors or assigned shift stations. Chef and Puddles were the last to leave them, along with the commander, the three heading to the bridge, turning off from their path which ended a few moments later. Jenker stopped at a closed hatch. Grabbing the wheel attached to it, he gave it a good spin and pulled it open. The heavy door swung easily, being perfectly balanced on well-lubricated hinges. He motioned for Merrick to go in, and the big man obliged, leaning down to step through without hitting his head. A practice he'd have to perfect if he was going to be around these people for any amount of time. Demad closed the porthole after following, waving him towards one of a pair of long couches to their right, together taking up most of the length of that side of the room. Situated near the wall, Ventrulus noted the rows of bookshelves behind where he was sitting, filled with thick leather-bound volumes that left him marveling at the sight. They didn't have books like these where he came from, made of paper, though he knew what they were from their records of such things, kept in a vast digital archive on Leopold VII. It was, for him, like coming face to face with a piece of ancient history, and being the military scholars the Zaxvoyan were, it was as enticing as sweets would be to a child. His built-in translation software would be working overtime, he thought. The tombs appeared to be organized into various subjects: military history and tactics, geography, marine and nautical volumes by far took up the most space, and a selection of what he would guess were personal books rounded it out, fiction or journals perhaps. It was a long area, and his host walked through another door into a second adjoining cabin, leaving him free to rest a moment, while the other went to clean up. There was a large wooden table in the middle of the cabin, with all manner of maps and rolled-up papers strewn across it. Decorative pins were used to hold unrolled parchment down. These were mostly undersea maps from what the spaceman could gather. He could hear the Havenite whistling from the other room. A rattling from a pipe over his head told him there was heated water running through this ship. The sound of a pressurized nozzle discharging liquid soon came to his ears, as did the notion that he could probably use a wash after sniffing himself. Merrick was still trying to get his head around the fact that this was Earth. They had made it after all, even though everything he had witnessed and was able to observe contradicted the information they had. Now he had to assess what kind of governance this strange world was organized around. They knew it would be radically changed in the thousands of years since the colony missions had departed the planet. But many of his assumptions at this point had to be shelved. Whatever state the current hierarchy of humanity had reordered itself into, Ventrulus felt like he was on the right path now that he'd connected with these Havenites, or at least this one. He had plenty of questions for the captain and waited with keen interest for him as he continued eyeing the shelves, noting a volume that had a title embossed along the spine, reading, "Forgotten Catastrophes and the Dark Age of Man." Getting up to pull it from the shelf, the enormous spaceman carefully slid it out with two-fingered grip, before quickly sitting back down to flip through it. The processor within his microchip was able to decipher the text. The printing inside the book was handwritten, and yet meticulously done. It was like looking at a work of priceless art in his mind. With a thought, the Zaxvoyan activated his optical recording, capturing the pages in digital storage for later analysis. This would allow him to return to review the book at his leisure at any later time. The information permanently stored inside his head, the ultimate private memory cache. He leafed through rapidly, not needing to stay on any page for more than a fraction of a second, just long enough to capture an image of the writing within. A translation of an early page caught his interest. It read, in part, And the dawn of humanity's industrial age was punctuated by two great wars. Together with the collateral global outfall of these events, cost our civilization hundreds of millions of lives, but this was nothing compared to what was to come later. Historians have already pieced the Third World War together. From communal anecdotal stories passed down along the generations among the simple ones, to recovered archaeological records and artifacts that have been inherited across various family lineages, creating a rudimentary picture for us of that bleak and terrible time. Ventrulus was stunned. He knew exactly what the opening part of this passage was referencing. It was World War I and World War II, an integral part of mankind's historical societal development. It was a piece of the colonists' carefully preserved past, almost as distant as it had been from the time the missions were sent out to the stars, in the many directions humanity had decided to spread. They retained those events in their digital libraries, inheriting them from the original settlers, preserved and shared with every generation up to the present. He had never heard of a Third World War. That was not part of their history and never had been. If there had been such a tumultuous conflict, it had unfolded after the colony ships had departed the planet. It might explain why contact had been lost all those many millennia ago, he realized. But he would need to know more. The Federal Global Sodality was the world governing body of their forefathers' time. It had sprung out of a less stable era, when the global coalition of nations struggled to organize a planetary authority. It was embroiled in a long contest for said power against other movements, the primary being the Free People's Party, the same whose emblem he had uncovered in those ruins a few days past. For Merrick, he had just stumbled upon some critical information. Not only did it directly tie this world to his past, but it also hinted at answers to some long unanswered questions. The spaceman stopped there. He could hear his host had already finished washing up and was getting changed. He spent his remaining minutes flipping through the pages as fast as he could. He had just closed the book and was placing it back on the shelf when Jenker returned to the cabin to rejoin him, freshly cleaned and sporting a new outfit. And there ends this episode. Until next time, thanks for listening. Please engage the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content.